Mark and Emily had been married for 7 years, and in that time, they had learned a lot about each other. Mark knew Emily couldn't start her day without coffee, and Emily knew Mark couldn't fall asleep without leaving the TV on. Their life was far from perfect, but it was filled with love, laughter, and most importantly arguments over the television remote. Yes, the remote. That slim plastic object had caused more wars in their household than unpaid bills or in-laws ever could. Mark was obsessed with controlling it. He didn't just watch TV, he commanded it, like a king ruling his empire. If Emily sat down to watch a movie, Mark would somehow appear out of nowhere, snatch the remote, and switch it to sports. If Emily finally convinced him to watch a romantic comedy, Mark would accidentally fall asleep halfway through, still clutching the remote to his chest like it was a sacred relic. Emily often joked that she was the queen of the house, but Mark was definitely the king of the remote. One Friday night, after a long week of work, Emily finally sat down with a bowl of popcorn to watch her favorite cooking show. She was barely 5 minutes in when Mark walked in, plopped on the couch, and with the grace of a thief, snatched the remote. "Really, Mark?" Emily glared at him. "What?" he replied innocently, already flipping to a basketball game. "The game's on. This is important." Emily crossed her arms. "And what exactly do you think is more important? Learning how to make chocolate lava cake or watching sweaty men throw a ball into a hoop?" Mark smirked. "The ball, obviously. Lava cake won't win the championship." Emily groaned, threw a piece of popcorn at him, and stormed off. That was when the idea first struck her. If Mark wanted to be the king of the remote, maybe it was time for her to stage a little palace coup. That weekend, while Mark was out mowing the lawn, Emily began her operation. She searched the entire living room until she found the remote wedged deep inside the couch, cushions, Mark's favorite hiding spot. Instead of putting it back, she took it straight to the kitchen and stashed it in the freezer, right behind the frozen peas. When Mark returned and settled onto the couch, he reached for the remote. His hand dug into the cushions. Nothing. His eyes narrowed. He flipped the cushions over. Still nothing. "Emily," he called, his voice panicked, as though the world was ending. "Where's the remote?" Emily peeked her head out of the kitchen. "Oh, I don't know. Maybe it ran away from you." "This isn't funny." Mark was now on his knees, searching under the coffee table like a detective at a crime scene. Emily chuckled silently, savoring the moment. For once, she had the upper hand. After 30 minutes of searching every corner of the living room, Mark finally collapsed on the couch, defeated. That night, they both sat in silence, staring at the blank TV screen. Emily smiled smugly to herself, knowing the battle had only just begun. The next morning, Mark was still grumpy. He shuffled into the kitchen with bed hair, glaring at Emily as she cheerfully sipped her coffee. "You know what happened last night was cruel," he muttered. Emily raised an eyebrow. "Cruel?" "Mark, it was one night without basketball. You survived." Mark sat down, dramatically rubbing his forehead. "You don't understand. I missed the final quarter." "The final quarter? That's like missing the ending of your lava cake show." Emily laughed. "It's a cooking show, Mark. They rerun it every day. And besides, you can live without one game." But Mark wasn't planning to live without his throne. He had a mission: reclaim the remote, no matter what. That afternoon, when Emily left for grocery shopping, Mark launched his own operation. He tore through the kitchen, finally discovering the remote in the freezer. His jaw dropped. "The freezer," he muttered. "Emily Carter, you're insane." But Mark wasn't angry, he was inspired. If Emily wanted to play hide and seek, then so be it. He would play too. And he would win. The next evening, Emily settled on the couch, bowl of popcorn in hand, determined to enjoy her drama series. She reached for the remote. "Gone." "Mark," she called, her voice suspicious. "Yes, darling," he replied from the other room, trying to sound casual. "Where's the remote?" "Remote? Oh, you mean the sacred object you froze like a popsicle yesterday." Emily marched into the kitchen. Mark was calmly sipping his soda, whistling innocently. "Don't play dumb with me," she said. "I'm not playing dumb," he smirked. "I'm playing smart." Emily stormed back to the living room and began searching. The cushions empty, the side tables clean, even the bookshelf nothing. Finally, after nearly 20 minutes, she found the remote inside Mark's sneaker by the door. "Really?" Emily shouted, holding it up. "The shoe." Mark grinned. "Genius, isn't it? You'll never think to look there again." But Emily wasn't done. Two could play this game, and she wasn't going to lose. The following day, Mark came home from work, tired and ready to relax. He sat down on the couch, grabbed the remote from the coffee table, except it wasn't the remote at all. It was a TV guide magazine. Emily had cleverly cut into the shape of a remote and taped together. Mark stared at it in disbelief. "Oh no, she didn't." Emily popped her head around the corner, grinning like a victorious queen. "Looking for this?" She held up the real remote and waved it in the air. Mark lunged for her, but she darted away, laughing hysterically. A full-blown chase erupted through the house, Mark running after Emily while she dodged into rooms, clutching the remote like a prize. By the time they collapsed onto the couch, both breathless, Emily was still holding it. "This means war," Mark said between gasps. "War accepted," Emily shot back, her eyes sparkling. And just like that, the remote control war officially began. By the third day of their ongoing battle, the living room looked less like a cozy space and more like a crime scene. Cushions were overturned, drawers left half open. Even the dog's bed had been searched. Because every night ended with one question: where's the remote? Emily was growing creative. One evening, Mark came home and plopped onto the couch, only to realize the remote was nowhere in sight. He sighed, already bracing himself for the hunt. After 15 minutes of searching high and low, he finally gave up. Emily strolled in casually, holding a glass of water. "Oh, you're looking for this?" she asked sweetly, pulling the remote out of the cookie jar. "The cookie jar." Mark's jaw dropped. "That's sacred territory." Emily smirked. "You wanted cookies. I gave you cookies. With channels." Mark grumbled but secretly admired her dedication. The next day, Mark decided it was his turn to up the game. He waited until Emily was busy gardening outside, then snatched the remote and carefully wrapped it in 3 layers of aluminum foil before hiding it inside the microwave. When Emily came back in and couldn't find it, she searched everywhere. Eventually, she opened the microwave for a snack and screamed, "Mark, you hid it in the microwave." He leaned against the doorframe, smug as ever. "Safe, secure, and radiation-proof." Emily couldn't help laughing. "You're insane." "Takes one to know one," Mark replied. But Emily wasn't going to let him win. The very next evening, she devised her most devious plan yet. When Mark sat down to watch his beloved basketball game, the remote was conveniently lying on the coffee table. Suspicious, he picked it up slowly, eyes narrowing. Emily sat next to him, innocent as a saint. "Too easy," he muttered. He pressed the power button. The TV didn't turn on. He pressed again. Nothing. He shook the remote, slapped it against his palm, even changed the batteries. Still dead. Emily burst out laughing, unable to hold it in any longer. "What did you do?" Mark demanded. "I swapped the batteries with AA-size carrots," she said between giggles. Mark opened the back of the remote and indeed found a tiny, cut 2-size carrot sticks stuffed inside. He stared at them in disbelief before finally laughing too. "Emily, you're officially out of control." "Oh no, darling," she grinned. "I'm officially in control." The war escalated even further over the week. Mark hid the remote inside a bag of flour. Emily's hands were covered in white dust when she found it. Emily taped it under the dining table, forcing Mark to crawl like a soldier in combat. Mark once even hid it inside the fish tank, wrapped in plastic. The fish seemed confused but unharmed. By now, neither of them even cared about watching TV. The remote itself had become the prize, the trophy, the golden crown of their household, and both of them were willing to do anything to win it. By now, the remote war had become the highlight of Mark and Emily's marriage. Their friends even noticed it. "You two always look so tired," their neighbor joked one afternoon. Emily just smiled. "Oh, just late-night battles." The neighbor winked. "Romantic. How?" Emily and Mark exchanged a look. If only they knew the truth. Mark, however, had reached his limit. Enough was enough. He wanted total victory. So, one Saturday morning, while Emily was out shopping, he pulled out his phone and ordered something online, a universal remote control, a device that could control the TV no matter what Emily did with the original one. When the package arrived, Mark opened it like it was treasure. "Oh, Emily," he whispered dramatically, "your reign is over." That evening, Emily confidently tucked the real remote inside a cereal box and sat down to watch her cooking show. Mark entered the room, holding nothing, looking suspiciously calm. "What?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Nothing," he said, smiling innocently. Emily smirked, knowing she had hidden the remote well. But then, without even moving, Mark casually pressed a button on the universal remote hidden in his pocket. The TV switched channels. Emily gasped. "What the?" Mark leaned back, smug. "Magic." She frantically grabbed the cereal box, pulled out the original remote, and tried to change the channel back. But every time she pressed a button, Mark countered with his secret weapon. Back and forth the channels flipped, faster and faster, until the TV looked like it was having a seizure. Emily dropped the remote and pointed at him. "You cheated." Mark stood tall, holding the universal remote like Excalibur. "I evolved." For a moment, it looked like Mark had won. But Emily wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. The next evening, they had guests over, 2 of Mark's coworkers and their wives. Everything was going smoothly. Emily served dinner, everyone chatted politely, and Mark bragged about his latest project at work. He sat proudly at the head of the table, universal remote tucked safely in his pocket like a lucky charm. That's when Emily struck. As soon as dessert was served, she excused herself, went to the living room, and turned on the TV. Mark frowned, confused. Then, without warning, the channel switched to a children's cartoon. He froze. Slowly, he pulled out his universal remote and pressed a button. The channel changed to news. Emily, standing at the doorway, pressed something on her phone. Instantly, the channel switched back to cartoons. "What's happening?" one of the guests asked, laughing. Oh, Mark stammered, pressing buttons frantically. The TV flickered between sports, cartoons, and a soap opera, lightning speed. Everyone burst into laughter, thinking it was some kind of trick show. Emily finally revealed her secret. She had also bought a universal remote 2 days before Mark. Mark's jaw dropped. You planned this." Emily grinned wickedly. "Oh yes. You think you're the only genius in this marriage." The guests clapped, entertained by the comedy unfolding before them. Mark covered his face with his hands, half embarrassed, half amused. The war wasn't just back on, it had reached a whole new level. After the universal remote showdown, things in the Carter household spiraled out of control. Now there weren't just 1 or 2 remotes, there were 3. Mark had his universal, Emily had hers, and the poor original remote was still lying in the cereal box, forgotten and abused. Every evening turned into a chaotic battlefield. Mark would sit in one corner, Emily in the other, both with remotes hidden like weapons in a Wild West duel. "Ready?" Emily smirked one evening. "Born ready," Mark replied, narrowing his eyes. She pressed her button. The TV jumped to a romantic movie. Mark immediately countered. It flipped to sports. Emily countered again. The Weather Channel. Mark fired back. Cartoons. Back and forth it went, channels flashing. So fast it looked like the television itself was begging for mercy. Finally, the TV gave a loud pop and went black. The screen went dead. Silence filled the room. Emily stared at the blank screen, remote still in hand. Mark slowly lowered his. "Did we kill it?" Emily gasped dramatically. "Oh my God, Mark, we murdered the TV." They both burst out laughing. It was so ridiculous, so over the top, that neither could stay mad anymore. But the war wasn't over, at least not for Mark. 2 days later, he called in a repairman to fix the TV. What Emily didn't know was that he had one final prank planned. That Friday night, Emily made popcorn and sat down, ready to enjoy her cooking show in peace. The TV flickered back to life, newly repaired. She smiled, holding the remote tightly. But then something strange happened. No matter what button she pressed, the TV only showed one thing, a giant picture of Mark's face, smiling awkwardly. Emily blinked. "What the?" Suddenly, a pre-recorded message started playing. On the screen, Mark appeared holding the remote like a trophy. "Dear Emily," his recorded self said dramatically, "if you are seeing this, it means I have won the war. I am now officially the king of the remote." Emily gasped, looking around. "Mark," she shouted. Mark appeared from the kitchen, grinning. Surprise! He had asked the repairman to load a silly slideshow into the TV just for this prank. Emily couldn't stop laughing. "You're ridiculous." And victorious, Mark added, puffing out his chest. But Emily wasn't done. She set down her remote, walked over to him, and leaned close. "You may be the king of the remote," she whispered, "but I'm still the queen of this house." Mark froze, confused, until Emily reached behind him and pulled a small gadget out of his back pocket. It was his universal remote. She tossed it onto the couch, kissed his cheek, and walked away with a sly smile. Mark groaned. "You're impossible. And you love it," Emily called back. That night, they sat together on the couch, no remotes, no battles, just laughter and popcorn. The TV stayed off, but somehow the room felt brighter than ever. The war of the remotes wasn't truly over. Both of them knew another round would come eventually. But for now, they had found the perfect truce, sharing the couch, sharing the laughter, and just maybe sharing the remote.